Hello, Mavs fans and Mavs enemies. I'm Kirk Henderson, joined by Josh Bowe. We are coming to you Friday night, March 7th, about 9:15. Dallas Mavericks played a nationally televised game against the Memphis Grizzlies, and they lost 122 to 111. Josh, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. How are you doing?
I mean, in terms of the basketball, this game had all the makings, at least if you were paying attention pregame. This was a game I was worried was going to be not just kind of ugly, but horrifying for the Mavericks. The Grizzlies had lost 4 straight coming in. The Mavericks got another bit of injury news right before the game. Their biggest guy was Dwight Powell, and then after that, it was Najee Marshall. So I was really worried that this game was going to suck, and then suck on national TV in a way that was going to be, just frankly, the way the last couple have been.
Right.
And instead, we actually got a really, if you're tuning in and if you're sort of insulated from the news around the Mavericks every fucking day, and you're just tuning in for the basketball, this was probably a game where you had a good time. I mean, I did. I wrote about the game, and all I can really ask is to be entertained. And this game had a lot of weird stuff going on, and I had a good time.
Yeah. They're doing that thing where without any of their bigs, they're playing basically 5 out. Funny enough, Powell didn't get hurt. He only played 8 minutes, so they really didn't play.
But he was like a useless 8 minutes, so that's why he just wasn't good.
Yeah. So I mean, they didn't play with a center all night. And the thing about this recent stretch where they're playing without a center is the paint is open. Now the paint is open on both ends of the floor. But for the Mavericks, they are driving, kicking like crazy. They shot 41 3-pointers tonight. They made 15 of them, which is okay. And that's the only reason why this was even a game, because they made 7 more 3-pointers than Memphis did.
I mean, but at one point that was 10. And I wrote about this because heading into the fourth quarter, the Mavericks were up by 5 and they ended up losing by 11. So there's a 16-point swing in the fourth quarter. And the Mavericks shooting just sort of died all at once. Because they were shooting
back down to earth.
I looked at this because I don't know what they ended up what the percentage was before this, but they were shooting 44% from 3 after 3 quarters, and they finished at 36.6.
Yeah, they had a 41-point third quarter and then a 17-point fourth quarter. Yeah, that's called regression to the mean. Folks.
Well, and before we, I don't. Josh talked about this. I listened to his podcast in the middle of Kansas at 2:00 in the morning when I was driving home from my parents' house. And Josh talked about how as these games go on, it's going to get kind of increasingly more difficult to talk about the basketball as we know it, unless, some guys start coming back. But I think there's enough basketball stuff from this game to where we can, talk about some interesting wins, some things that are there. And then we'll, talk about some of the news around the Mavericks. I did want to point out, this is just while we're here, just from housekeeping. One guy on Twitter who listens to our show said, you guys could start talking about college prospects. And I think we'll get there. But the overarching problem with that is Josh and I don't know shit. So
love the draft a lot.
I love the draft,
and a lot of smart draft people. So that
and I just like reading about it. So it's my current draft obsession is a guy named Trey Johnson who plays for Texas, who played up here at Lake Highlands and took them to the 6A championship as a junior. He is dope.
I was going to say most of your college basketball knowledge is probably your whatever transfers from high school because you watch.
I like high school basketball. Yeah, I'm a sicko.
Sicko. I mean, you're in North Texas high school basketball. If you're going to like high school basketball,
that's right.
Living in North Texas is not a bad place.
That's right. That's right. And before I forget, shout out to our friend Mavs Draft who took a job with a NBA agency, which I think is neat. Anyway, back to the game. So there are some really laugh out loud stat lines, and which one should we talk about first? Najee Marshall or Brandon Williams?
Brandon Williams, man, two-way guy scoring 31 points.
Two-way guy scoring 31 points. So one of the stats that just lived in my brain from probably the first 35 games or so was that did you know that Brandon Williams leads the G League in scoring?
Yeah, he's averaging 28 per game in the G
Now, he's
League.
only played 8 games, which means he's spent enough time with the Mavericks. But in 8 games, he was averaging 28.5 points on really efficient shooting, like 39% from 3 and 48% from the field overall. And yeah, we know the G League is fake. But I also was sitting here thinking, all right, this is a guy who can score. And with the Mavericks, he's always been a little bit of a facilitator. But tonight they needed points. And up until Najee Marshall in the third quarter, the first half was all Brandon Williams scoring. He was nuts and he was fun. I really enjoyed watching him.
Yeah, I mean, you're trying to figure out what is real and what's March kookiness, because there's a lot going on at this time of the month where it's hard to tell what's real and what's fake because guys are hurt. Contenders are kind of coasting because their seed is kind of wrapped up. Bad teams have given up for a long time now. So there's the competitiveness is only really kind of like that middle of the pack, which admittedly that's where Memphis is. Like Memphis needs to be winning games, but they're also hurt and banged up. No Jaren Jackson Jr. Ja is a mess physically right now, as you saw in the first half.
He's not on the injury report. Did you know that?
I did not know that. That's crazy. I don't know how they're getting away with it.
I listened to Tim McMahon and the Hoop Collective podcast talk about it, and Windhorst said something to the effect of like, there's nothing physically wrong with this shoulder, which is why he's not on the injury report. But there's something going on to where he's just not shooting the ball right at all.
Yeah. And you saw that in the first half.
I mean, he was 1 of 10.
I think I saw 1 of 13 at one
point.
Maybe.
Okay. It was like, because it's like you look at his, he scored 31 points on 29 shots.
Yeah. He was not efficient.
No.
Almost all of that was in the second half.
Yes.
So that's the reason. That's the 2 reasons Memphis won this game is the Mavericks stopped hitting their threes and Josh started looking like John. Like that. That's kind of the short end of it. But yeah, Williams
34 minutes. I mean, he was exhausted. At one point, he got knocked on his ass on a hard foul and just sort of sat there for a minute, which I really got a kick out of that.
8 free throw attempts. I mean, and it wasn't just, he got hot from 3, 4 of 8, but, he made 6 2-point. Got to the rim a pretty decent amount. And again, the one benefit of not playing a center is you spread them out. I thought the Mavericks tactically, I know in the plus minus, Zach Edey, Memphis's huge rookie center, is a +4, but I felt like the Mavericks were at their best when Edey was on the floor because they were just punishing Edey's, size in terms of spreading him out and trying to make him guard at the 3-point line. And then I felt like they got to the rim a lot, and that was when they were playing their best. And then when they went small ball with Brandon Clark at center, I felt like that's when Memphis kind of got back into the game. But
yeah,
I don't know if the plus minus reflects that, but that's how it felt watching the game.
Yeah. Well, and the other guy who was fun, I mean, there's more than that, but the other guy who really was I got a kick out of watching tonight was Najee Marshall.
Dude, his stat line is hilarious.
Well, so his plus minus, he finished a -16, which is very funny, despite scoring 29 points and grabbing 17 rebounds, including 6 offensive ones. He got to the free throw line 9 times. He was 1 of 6 from 3, which means he was 9 of 17 from 2-point range. And he's just, what he strikes me as, honestly, and I think we kind of knew this because we talked about this when he was playing well with Luka. He's just got to be one of the most maddening pickup basketball players to play in existence because he's just so crafty. I like watching him play. He'd be a much higher paid player if he could hit the 3 ball. Like that's
his thing.
That's his thing. He can't hit. He just can't shoot from anywhere beyond, like 19 feet or whatever.
He can make floaters like nobody's business, man. Yeah, watching Najee these last few games is kind of sad, knowing, and a lot of it is sad, knowing like what could have been. And I'm sorry to already bring it back to the Luka trade, and I'm sure people are going to be mad, but like coming out of that Boston Finals loss, it's very funny because the thing that the Mavericks lost that series, it wasn't defense, and I know that nationally Luka got picked on for his defensive lowlights in that series. But the Mavericks actually, like Boston didn't score super efficiently in that series. The problem was the Mavericks couldn't do anything outside of Luka and Kyrie kind of generating everything. And the Najee acquisition this past summer was like a move towards, okay, we need more guys that are not just 3-and-D. Like they have to be able to put the ball on the floor and attack a closeout. Because if you just surround your stars with standstill 3-and-D spot up shooters, like the game defenses are too good. Like the NBA is too smart. These coaches are too smart. These teams are too smart. They will figure a way around that. The way you beat that is with guys that can attack a closeout, and that's Najee. Like that attack off the dribble floater game. Like it makes me really sad. Like I would have loved to see how that looked with the team that we thought that they had built this year in the playoffs, because that was what they needed, and he's providing it. Like he's doing exactly what they needed out of him, and it's kind of sad that it feels like it's going to go in vain because like this season's lost. And even when everything's back to normal in terms of health, if it ever does come back to normal, we'll see what happens this summer. But like, it's not going to be the same because it's a different team now that has different issues. So I just wish we could have seen that.
Yep, it's really something. So, other guys, it's nice to see Caleb Martin on the court. The Mavericks they're so hurt at this point that you just want to see bodies out there. I was sort of worried about both him and Exum. Exum had a really rough, borderline awful game tonight. Yeah. But he's hurt. Caleb Martin's coming back from a hip injury who, if he's not hurt anymore, he's at the very least rusty. I suspect we'll see more of him against the Suns. But other than that, there's kind of not really anything to take away from his game in relation to this, right?
No, he got through the game and didn't look like he reacted or anything. He was moving well. Looked like he was guarding pretty well. Like he was moving his feet pretty well, so that's good. And with a hip injury, that's what you look for, right?
Yes. So I'd like to so B-boys in the chat comment on this, and I'm glad he mentioned it because it's something I think that tonight is at least worth talking about here. Max Christie's had a pretty hard regression after a really good start. Yep. And I think it's worth talking about why. I mean, largely why is because he's a 8th, 9th man, and he's having to play as a starter, and he doesn't quite have some of the things yet to do what the Mavericks are asking of him, offensively at least. Defensively is where I think the discussion around him gets pretty interesting, because he has a little bit of a reputation of a defender, and I think that is probably where you'll see the most debate about him. He's got 6'9" wingspan, big arms, but after an early start, he's just been a little goofy. And do you want to? I have a take on why I think that is.
Okay, I'll get my take in there first, then you let me know, because the defense stuff I don't know for sure. He looks like he should be a good defender. I wonder if that's where his reputation comes from, just his body, his profile. But offensively, it's pretty easy. He's not making pull-up 2-pointers anymore. Yeah. If you look at his games from that stretch where he was scoring 15 points in a row every single game, he was shooting like 50% on pull-up 2s, which is awesome. But that is super not something that I think we were prepared for him to do over a longer stretch of games. So he's no longer self-creating as well as he was in the first few games. And I wonder if part of that is the team has gotten progressively more hurt.
Yes.
So that means there's less space, less room, and more attention on him. So yeah, offensively, that's kind of why, because he's still shooting the 3. Okay. He was 2 of 5 tonight. Like he had a couple bad games before this, but he's like, his 3-pointer overall is okay, but he's not hitting pull-up 2s anymore, which is kind of what he was doing in those first, 10 or so games where he was just lighting it up. And that's kind of where his offense went. Now, what's your take?
So, okay, I want to go check his minutes because Paul Armstrong in the chat says he's basically said this guy's dogging it on the defensive end. And I actually think there's something to that. Since coming to the Mavericks, he has averaged 33 minutes a game. With the Lakers, let's see here, in November, he played 18 minutes a game. I'm sorry, in October and November, he basically played 17, 18 minutes a game. In December, his minutes total started to go up. In January, he's playing 31 minutes a game. I think 2 things here. First, I think he's running into the equivalent of his sort of rookie wall. I know he's not a rookie, but this is a significant step up in his usage compared to previous years. So I think he's running into a wall there. The other thing, and this is really why I think he looks like ass on defense, is he's not playing in front of Anthony Davis right now. Like this is an ideal. This is an ideal guy to play in front of Anthony Davis, Derek Lively, Daniel Gafford, where he can be, he can gamble. He can be if he's not necessarily a stopper, he's a disruptor. And if the Mavericks don't have anybody guarding the rim, I kind of think he's pointless. Not pointless. Like it's just like what he brings is not. His value goes down significantly with how they're playing, and that's defense is a team concept. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's not just him. That's not unique to him.
And like the Mavericks can't guard anybody right now because they don't have anybody of size. Like the tallest player on the court tonight was 6'6".
Right.
Yeah. 6'7", maybe, whatever. Who cares?
Yeah, no, I know. I'm splitting hairs. But yeah, you're right. You're right.
And so that's sort of my theory here, to where I want to put a pin in the discussion and say, I like what I've seen. I also get it if you think he sort of is right now. That's fine. That's a perfectly normal take to have. He is on a fantastic deal. He's getting paid $8 million a year for the next 3 years. Like that's a rotation player on a valuable contract.
Yeah, exactly.
So
for sure. Yeah, nothing more to. I don't even really have anything to add. You nailed it.
Yeah. Okay, well, here's what we're gonna do here. I'm gonna talk to you guys a minute about our sponsor. It's a company that's been with us since November. A company called Body Spec, and what they do is they provide a full body DEXA scan. It is a body composition scan, and it can help tell you what is going on with your body. Now, guys, Josh and I both did one of these about 8 weeks ago. I got mine back in December, but I just sort of waited until the new year, and I got in some better habits. And for the last 8 weeks, really ground my ass off at the gym, and really with some, kind of different eating habits. And over the last 8 weeks, I've lost like 17 pounds. I got just under 230. Awesome. No, I got under 230 and then celebrated by going to eat a chicken sandwich, as one does. So immediately went right back over 230, but that's fine.
But where did you get that chicken sandwich from?
A place called Bird and Egg. I'll give them a promo later. It's out here in Plano. It's good. Anyway, so Body Spec gives you this body composition scan. And what it basically told me was I was doing some things, and I had a particular kind of fat, which is not good. And I'm going to go get another one of these scans in probably a week or two to see where I am relative to where I was. These scans are really affordable. And if you use the promo code PODMAVS45, that's PODMAVS45 for $15 off, you can get this scan. A number of our listeners have gotten it and talked to me about it. And I really recommend it if you're looking to kind of get yourself in shape. There's a link in the show notes. You can click on it. By signing up and getting one of these scans, you are helping us directly. We get a portion of your scan, like of the cost of your scan. So you're doing something for you. You're doing something for us. And I just want to recommend it to you guys. I don't want to act like it's changed my life, but it's given me a different perspective. And that is helpful because fitness is a pain in the ass. You would like
it's also shockingly easy, and not everything about health and fitness is easy.
Yeah. No, it's shockingly easy. You just you go, you sign up. They have locations all around Dallas. Like, you'd be really surprised when you go to this website and look around. You go, you get one, it like in and out in less than 10 minutes. And then you get a really lengthy email sent to you with not only like, here's where your problem areas are, here's where your strengths are, and some thoughts on what you can do to be better. Okay, I'm going to insert some ads because we still have to pay our bills. Listening to those will be helpful. Then Josh and I will come back and talk about some of the news of the day. We'll be right back. All right, guys, thanks so much for sticking with us during the break there. Again, Josh and I keep coming back because we appreciate the community we've built here, even though the comments during our shows recently have become like knife fights. We actually have an interview with Tim McMahon next week, and I'm going to need you guys to not be psychopaths. Thank you. What should we talk about?
Well, what do you want? You didn't get to record last. So this is your first podcast since Kyrie news. So there's probably been a lot of takes percolating in your brain. There's the Mark Cuban interview, which I didn't watch because I don't want to watch it. despite the fact that I probably need to watch it just for. And then there's just react like.
Sure.
You haven't been able to talk on our platform. Like I almost want to cede the floor to you, not to put you on the spot, but what's bubbling around in your brain? Because I kind of got it out of my system the last podcast. Because the thing I was thinking about a lot since the Kyrie injury is just thinking about like how this was a young, sustainable like contender and it was working. And it's just so crazy to think that we're like how quickly it has changed the trajectory, and that's going to be sticking with me for a while.
That's right.
So I don't know.
Well,
what you've been thinking about lately.
The Kyrie news is obviously quite devastating. I really hope there's not more damage in his knee. Tim Legler talked about kind of the variations that can happen. And it's not just the ACL you should be worried about. It's other stuff too. There's going to be a lot of rehab. He's an older, smaller guard. He relies upon his skill, but his quickness is definitely a weapon. So I'm hopeful that everything goes well for him. I will say, and I'm glad you kind of prompted me with this. The statement that Dallas Mavericks general manager Nico Harrison put out is one of the lamest fucking things in the history and space and time. And I went from thinking that this guy is a crazy egotist to I have serious concerns about his mental well-being. I mean, I'm just going to read you part of this. This is about Kyrie Irving. This is a statement from Nico Harrison, and I quote, "His work ethic and absolute dedication to his craft, it's cut from the cloths of greats. I know it. I lived it. And I see the same ferocity and passion in him that I saw in Kobe. I know it. I know it. I lived it.
I lived it.
Shut the fuck up, you shoe salesman." Like that, like seriously, like he needs to shut the fuck up. I am so frustrated with him and this joke of a PR machine that's coming out through the Mavericks to where let's just go through the timeline in order. He trades Luka Doncic the day after the trade, maybe 2 days after the trade. He has a horrible press conference.
No, it was the next day.
It was the next day. A horrible press conference in Cleveland, not in Dallas. So the only people that are there are national media, Cleveland media, and the few Dallas media that take the trip.
Because most Dallas media don't travel to road games.
Right. It's expensive. It's hard to do.
Yeah.
He embarrassed himself at that press conference. He showed right then and there that he is not a primetime player. From there, he hid. He goes to Dallas games, but he doesn't go and sits in his seats. That's fine. I'm not going to make a judgment call on that. But then he went to Los Angeles. And not only did he go to Los Angeles, he hobnobbed with the Lakers people. And I mean this, guys. I have reports from people on the ground.
You don't even need reports. He was at center court with.
He was at center court. He's talking with all the people. He's looking like this is an inside job. Okay, talking and have some shame. Don't make this like I'm tired of the conspiracy stuff because the simple fact of the matter is this very arrogant man thought that Anthony Davis is better than Luka Doncic. That's why the trade happened. I'm tired of these Facebook mom posts and things I see on Instagram where it's like, look at this conspiracy theory. No, it's not that hard.
And the owner approved it because he doesn't know anything about basketball. And he hired Nico to do the basketball. So he trusted him.
He is Gaston's friend in Beauty and the Beast. Go look up the photo. Okay. That's who we have. That's our owner. Okay. I don't expect him to know anything about basketball. But then Kyrie hurts. And so like, keep in mind, guys, this is like a month. Nico says nothing for a month. Okay. And Kyrie gets hurt and it's awful. It is awful. If the Mavericks want to put out a statement, put out a statement. But the fact of the matter is that in the last month and a half, he and Jason Kidd have waged a not so secret war of words and information campaign slandering Luka Doncic. And guys, it's not that hard to tell who it is. There's just not enough people in the Mavericks organization. The Mavericks are not some big business. There's 5 people that could have said these things. Okay. And so they've been doing this. Then you put out this really flowery, loving statement about Kyrie Irving. And I get it. You do. If none of this other stuff had happened, this wouldn't bother me. Because I want to know that you love the players. But this is like, it just looks stupid. It looks stupid.
Your GM and your owner have both given public comments since the Luka trade, talking about the greatest players in the NBA. And not once has the owner or the GM of the Dallas Mavericks, when talking about the greatest players in the NBA, referencing whether that's Anthony Davis's work ethic or Kyrie Irving's work ethic, not one of them brought up Dirk Nowitzki's name. And if you need a better example that this team is run by people that don't get it and aren't part of this community, like there you go. You got your owner talking about Shaq and work ethic.
Which I feel bad for this guy. Like, he's walked into the buzzsaw, but he doesn't know what he's talking about.
I know. But then you got your GM talking about Kobe. And it's probably better that they're not talking, in one way it's kind of, it feels a little disgraceful to not even talk about Dirk when you're trying to compare to all these greats. But on the other end, they don't know Dirk. I mean, they weren't here. Like, that's why they're not, they're not Dallas guys. Like Patrick Dumont has no idea who the Mavericks were until he bought the team. And Nico was with Nike, hanging out with Kobe and Anthony Davis and Kyrie. It is funny though, because Dirk was a Nike guy. I guess he didn't get to know Dirk very well. While Dirk was at Nike.
I mean, I'm just not prime. That like the I know it, I lived it thing makes me want to fucking vomit.
What did you live? Were
man? You like did you bring him a Nike towel at one of his workouts? Like, Nico Harrison played basketball at a high level. He played basketball overseas. Yeah. I get really freaking, I never did that. I get really frustrated when I talk about him, when we were like, this man doesn't know ball. That's not true. He's not qualified to be a general manager. Okay. Like, that's fair to say. He's not he's never going to get a general manager job again. Like, that part of this is done, but like, he's not a complete, neophyte. He knows basketball. He just doesn't know like enough. He's got a warped perception of what he thinks ideal basketball is. Like, and guys, look, I can say this because this is a podcast. I don't like typing this out. People on Twitter go crazy, but you guys got to understand, when what happened with Kobe Bryant and the rape accusation trial in Colorado, the Kobe system stuff and the Black Mamba stuff was a marketing campaign that came out to help push Kobe past his PR disaster.
So I changed his number.
Yes, like Nico and Nike was a part of this. That's part of the game. I'm not passing judgment here. But where I am passing judgment is, it sounds like you started to believe marketing copy as a religious text. And that shit is weird. It's weird. Like, go run a Kobe fan account if that's what you want to do. Kobe's not my favorite player, but I don't want to disrespect him. I also, in the Dallas Mavericks context, don't give a single shit about him.
Why not, Kirk? His number's retired. Mavericks retired his number.
Which is a nice pivot. That actually allows me a pivot point, because I could just sit here and rep on Nico all day. To Mark Cuban's interview, which Mark Cuban went on WFAA.
Did you actually watch it, by the way?
I read most of it. I can't stand listening to him. Okay. And it was he talked about cost plus drugs, and so he's apparently pissed at WFAA for saying that they kind of took his interview out of context, and was like, and it's like, homie, nobody.
Wait, so is he under the impression that his interview was not supposed to be about?
That's right. He went on Blue Sky and did that. I'm pretty sure. At least unless somebody sent me a fake screenshot, which is entirely possible. Anyway, his interview was fine. He didn't say anything really controversial. He really chapped my ass specifically when he the part of the interview, he's the part of the interview that made news and you saw aggregated was him talking about, well, if you're going to trade him, you have to get more. And that's not controversial. Like, I don't understand how that made news. The part that really chapped my ass and I went on a Twitter tirade about this at like this morning too. I was just still so mad about it. Was he talked about how they don't have the ability to sell what they're doing. They're not me was the thing that he actually said. And I lost it at this. And I'm going to go see if I can find the quote here. Filibuster for me for a second.
Yeah, Mark Cuban, master, as you eloquently put on Twitter, master of PR since what, post 2011? How many public foot in his mouth situations has Mark Cuban had when he was the sole basketball decision maker? Not sole, but the head basketball decision maker. You've got the Kenyon Martin thug stuff when they played Denver in the playoffs. You got his comments about AAU ball and Euro ball, and I mean not saying Russell Westbrook is an MVP when Westbrook won the MVP, all that stuff. So yeah, now go ahead.
This is a quote from Mark Cuban. I think the biggest challenge that the Mavs have right now is there's nobody who's really outgoing to communicate. It's not so much what you do, it's how you communicate why you do what you do. And that's their challenge without me in front. I think it's just not their nature. They're just not me. You can't expect them to be me. That made me so viscerally angry. And here's the thing. Most of the local media is simpatico right now in terms of how we feel about the ownership and the Mavericks. Part of where our podcast grew was we did not buy the Maverick Company line from 2013 until ever. Okay. When the Mark Cuban line started to be much more out there. And what Mark Cuban fails to understand to this day is that when he speaks or when he spoke as owner, he was news, regardless of whether what he was saying was true or not. He was news. And where I took beef with so many of our friends in local Dallas media, and I got to be careful here because I don't want to insult anybody, but people took what he said as being gospel. There was he broke down the 2011 title team to chase Chris Paul and Dwight Howard. After they lost out on Dwight Howard, he had the audacity to go and tell the media, I think we're better off without him. And you know what? The local media around here bought that shit for years. So if Cuban's saying right now, they're missing my ability to sell, I don't think anyone ever really bought what he sold because the results weren't there. He failed Dirk. He really did. And he doesn't take near enough heat for that. And then what he did was he finally got out of the way after drunk Donnie Nelson embarrassed himself enough to the point to where the shadow GM didn't even want anything to do with the team. Haralabah Vulgaris. All those guys moved on. Rick Carlisle quit. Donnie Nelson got fired or turned in his notice before Cuban could fire him. Then Cuban went out and found Jason Kidd, who he then and Nico Harrison, who were a package deal. I don't know who was more important.
Yeah, Nico said he wouldn't be GM unless Kidd was his coach.
That's right. And then Cuban used Dirk Nowitzki to sell the pitch to us, even though Jason Kidd had been out of a job. And Josh and I are on the record about this. Go check all our podcasts. We might have came around on Kidd because of the results, but I think it's fair to say now that the winner of all that was Luka Doncic. Luka was why shit worked. Really hard. Then he sells the team after placing these guys in charge. Now, when Cuban was in charge, I think Nico Harrison was largely there to smooth Cuban's edges with people that they weren't able to get in front of. I actually think it was a potentially a great pairing. I really do.
Yeah, I think so. Because Cuban, I think our beefs with Cuban as the basketball decision maker wasn't necessarily that he had power. It was more just he was just too hands-on.
He's too hands-on. No, I'm sorry, no NBA player wants to hear from a 60-something white guy. They just don't. That's okay. It's not a controversial statement. Yeah. The Mavericks front office at that point was unbelievably white. And that mattered long enough. You had Donnie Nelson, who was old, Rick Carlisle, who was old and really not well liked, and then Cuban. It's they needed some diversity, and Jason Kidd and Nico Harrison helped bring some credibility back.
And Cuban going from the orchestrator of everything to the final say, I think made a big difference.
Yeah.
How they made moves.
And then he decides to sell the team. And I have a lot of feelings on the selling of the team. But the bottom line is what we see now is they left a wolf in the hen house.
Right. Because the final check went away, by the way. Because Cuban was the final check. Now with Dumont, obviously he still has to sign off on things, but he doesn't fucking know.
No.
he
takes ultimate responsibility, but it's like,
right.
I save my ire for Harrison. I save my frustration, but it's much more simmered for Dumont.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because he bought,
Yeah.
He doesn't know. He doesn't know basketball. He's not a basketball guy. So that was the one thing that sucked about going from Cuban to Dumont is like, because if this would, if Cuban was still the majority owner, we could say what we want about Cuban. I feel pretty confident that if Nico brought this trade to Cuban, he says no. And maybe, I don't know if he fires him, but I don't think the trade happens if Cuban's the majority owner of the team.
And shout out to our longtime listener, Paul, with a comment that just rankles me, so I'm going to address it. When the tell-all book comes out, it'll be 100% collusion in the casino with your patsy fall guy, Nico. I would believe more ownership-level collusion if two things had happened. One, if they actually would have had a bidding war, but the fact is they went to one team for one player. That one player was a Nike guy who Nico knew and who Kid wanted. Kid wants him. Kid prefers defensive bigs. He sought out JaVale McGee for Christ's sakes. Like this is just, it's the thing. And second, I don't think a billionaire would willingly take away value from something the way that they did with the Mavericks. Like moving on from Luka Doncic is like, it's a $500 million to $1 billion mistake. Like Luka might have made $300 million from the Mavericks, but the valuation for him only goes it only pushes the team up.
Billionaires do not like to lose money.
No, very important element of this. And they're here for the long haul. They want the casino, like the gambling part, all this stuff. The Mavericks envision the thing that they have in Irving. You could go to one of the city council meetings and
by the way, how do you pitch your resort mega casino experience to a city when your team sucks and you don't have a star to attack? By the way, like I don't see how Dumont being like, we need to get Luka out of here so we can get a casino built in tech. Like that also doesn't make sense either, because Luka is there to sell a new building.
No,
it'd be like the Warriors trading Steph Curry to try to get the Chase Center built in San Francisco. Like what?
Yeah.
That's not how you do it.
Well, and so, I've been really pushing, and look, the position of me, Josh is a more impartial person. The position of me, Kirk Henderson, Pod Maverick host, and I'm not going to say I speak for Mavs Moneyball, but editor at Mavs Moneyball. My position very clearly is that Nico Harrison should be fired with haste. Now, we get into the practicalities of this. How bad, and this is not a question I expect you to answer right now, but the question that needs to linger with you Mavs fans is this. How bad does it need to get for Nico Harrison to not retain his job before, to be cut off basically before the draft, to be fired before June? How bad does it need to get for the Mavericks? And I honestly don't think it'll get that bad. I don't think it'll get bad enough. I think that what will happen is
bad.
this is what happens in all businesses. If you've ever seen it, executive level management rarely admits mistakes until far, far beyond the expiration date of a failed idea. Nico Harrison will be with the Mavericks, in my opinion, through next season, where they will put out a mediocre team, where they will finish somewhere in the 12-9 range. They won't trade Anthony Davis, but my take is right now they need to fire Nico Harrison as soon as possible, promote Michael Finley to the temporary general manager spot, and begin the process of nuking this team and rebuilding from the ground up.
Yeah, and that's not a lot of people share that opinion. A lot of Dallas media share that opinion. I think Bob Sturm of The Ticket also feels the same way as you do. I mean, I feel the same way too, and I also agree that it's not gonna happen.
Well, you wrote the piece the other day that I think was worth hitting on, is that the worst part of this, we're not there yet. I think it feels really bad right now because it's constant, but the worst part is apathy and horrible basketball. Yep. And that's where we're heading. And that's what you mean by bad.
Right. Exactly. Where bad is when there's, 12,000 people in an arena on a Wednesday night, and they're in 11th place. So, which is kind of where they're with no young star, by the way, to like try to goose some more ticket sales, because they're not going to have, unless they hit it in one of these next couple of drafts, they're not going to have picks for like 3 years, from 2027 to 2030. They're probably not going to have a first round pick in any of those drafts.
Yeah.
Oh, they will, but it's not going to be a good one, because the OKC will swap 2028 and San Antonio will swap 2030. So they're not going to. They might be a bottom 5 NBA team as soon as 2027, and not have a top 10 pick from there till 2031. Nope. That is the reality. That is the Brooklyn Nets before the KD Kyrie acquisitions, when they nuked that team to try to trade for all these players to do one last run, with Mikhail Prokhorov as the owner. Remember that stretch where they were, it's not only that they were bad, but they couldn't even reap the benefits of being bad. That's rock bottom. When you're bad and there's also no sign of it.
Mm-hmm. It's brutal.
Yeah. So, and I'm with you, because if Nico convinced Dumont to trade Luka, he can probably convince Dumont to give him another year. Mm-hmm. Right. So the only way I think he gets fired before the end of next season, so anytime between now and before the end of the 2026 season, is if the financials spiral so far out of control that he has to let him go.
Which it could. I mean, tickets to tonight's game were $10 or less, and the arena is no longer filling up.
People are canceling the TV subscriptions.
Yep. You hit them in the wall.
They're going to be off national TV.
Mm-hmm. And again, you already lost valuation because of Luka. There's some real problems ahead.
Jersey sales, all that stuff, merch sales. If that gets bad, then maybe that's the only way.
Well, we'll have more to talk about. We won't lament this all the time, but there's a couple of things that had happened. And, every time I expect the news to slow down about this, somebody else says something just kind of insane, and it is what it is. We'll be back Sunday evening. So the Mavericks play an odd Sunday afternoon game, a nationally televised disaster game against the Suns for who wants it less. That should be fun to watch. 2:30 in the afternoon. Before we go, just quick shout out, just because I love local area basketball. I think it's Kennedale won the 4A. There's obviously 2 different divisions and high school classifications for each level, which it's just, there's so many high schools and so many kids. Let's see here. It was Kennedale won the Division II 4A state championship, and then Dallas Kimball just clinched and won a 4A Division I state championship, which I think is pretty cool. Dallas area teams bringing home trophies. Again, guys, if you're in the area here and you get to go watch a high school basketball game. If the Mavericks are making you sick, there's just such fun stuff.
There's a not bad chance that if you go to a high school basketball game in North Texas, that there's someone on the floor that's going to be like an NBA starter in 5 years. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's how good the talent is up here.
Yeah, it's great, and it's fun. I mean, the games are short. NBA games can kind of make you hate basketball because they're 2 hours and 40 minutes long. 8-minute quarters for a high school basketball game, you're in and out, an hour and 15. It's fantastic.
Let's just get a shot clock, Texas. Let's get that shot clock.
You know why they don't do that? Have you ever heard why?
No.
Because for each game, they have to employ someone, pay someone the money to do it. And so a lot of the high schools just can't afford it.
That makes sense. Because I was going to say, how you probably can't get a 24 shot clock installed in these gyms for all these schools.
You go, and a lot of them have them.
Wow.
It's okay. I don't get. Oh well, whatever. Okay. Thanks so much, team, for hanging out with us. This has been Kirk Henderson and Josh Bowe. We'll be back on Sunday. Check out Mavs Moneyball if you want to read any just delightfully sad content. Everybody, appreciate you hanging out in the chat. We'll talk soon. Go Mavs.